It's a real honor to be here. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but it's sort of ironic and hopefully a little bit humorous. I'm Erik Stilling, and this is my partner, Peter Smit. It's an honor to be here, and the real honor, of course, goes to everybody we've ever learned from, including my friend back there and all of you, because we've been watching your presentations also. And I guess thanks go to everyone that we've learned from, our collaborators and our students and everybody we've ever worked with, and especially my wife, who taught me to be both civilized, sober, and housebroken even. So what we're going to talk about is a little bit about communication, which I think is, and I got the switch them over.
This is our presentation for 4 o'clock, please.
Right. Beautiful.
How do you
All right,
get?
well, we're off to a swimming start. Anyway.
Skype for business, man.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about communications.
Yes, Kino.
Yeah, yay. Okay, because communications is such a broad term and such a fundamental term at the same time. It's at the basis of almost everything probably all of you do in one way or another. And in the early, do the little, it's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was working on my doctorate in the late 1980s, there was a dominant model of communication, and I know this is Dr. Callaus's favorite model of communication. He's talked to me quite a bit about it. I say that ironically. And ironically, this model of communication was developed by Shannon and Weaver just after World War II, which kind of explains things in a way. Ironically, I say, because it was developed by the AT&T Bell Laboratories, where a telephone is clearly a very two-way method of communication, and yet their model was really one way, in my opinion. As you can see, it's very, very linear. Sender, message, sender, receiver. Sometimes you'll see a feedback, very, very barely emphasized, if at all. It seems to be optional in this model. And a lot of critics had pointed out, and will continue to point out, this isn't really communication as much as it is better described as persuasion. In fact, the early studies suggested that you knew the message was clearly received when you saw a change in the behavior of the receiver. Think about that. Coming out of World War II, I'm thinking military, and you do as you're told and whatever. Maybe that makes sense back then, but it's not communication, it's persuasion. And as a young student, I was looking into what is communication. Clearly, this isn't really it. So I tried to go back to the early Proto-Indo-European phonemes of the word communication. I can't find a dictionary that does this.
You got it. It means to share.
Thank you. Com with, uni, one. To become one with. Share is a very good way of thinking about this. I can't find a dictionary that does this, but I know it's out there. What I did find in my searches through the libraries as a young student was a different model by Norbert Winer, the feedback model, which is probably second nature to all of you. If you're not familiar with the actual study, you're familiar with the process. And I was fascinated. I'm like, this is how communication works. So, back to school. At the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which is still a really good school for mass communication, despite the fact that they were based on the Shannon and Weaver linear model. This is the way the program worked, and it's relevant. Coursework, lectures, discussions, and independent reading, and that's where I stumbled upon Norbert Winer and feedback model. Then you have a diagnostic test. then a defense of that paper on this diagnostic test, which is just 8 hours of writing on one topic. They give you a liter of water, a pack of cigarettes, a computer, and a question, and say, write for 8 hours. And they didn't tell you that. And then we're going to sit you up in front of a panel of your superiors and shine a spotlight on you and fire questions at you in your defense. So, in the middle of my defense, where it felt like an old black and white movie, police interrogation with bright lights and blowing cigarette smoke in my face, and very intimidating, but I was doing great, and I was defending the Norbert Winer model. Before me sat 8 of the most highly published people in mass communications of the time, all of whom did all of their research based on the Shannon and Weaver model, which I had just basically suggested we throw in the garbage. I was doing great. I knew I was fighting off every attack. Then I looked down, and I'm in a tie, and I got my best shined up shoes, and I looked down, and I realized I had 2 black shoes. But they're 2 different black shoes. I went into a panic and started sweating. I'm like, finally I failed. They caught me, made me make a value judgment in a scientific question, and okay, you're done, you're out. Great job, kid. You did it the hard way. We're really proud of you. You passed, but they had to make you fall. So I realized I should have just fallen 10 minutes in and gotten it over with quick. But it was too late. But really, the thing to take away from that was that had I looked at their attacks on my position as feedback about my paper, I would have realized it's they're being defensive of their own work. And I could have looked at my paper in context of their work, would have been a whole different experience. And maybe I would have been able to help them see that they need to use Winer's model. Maybe. So that was the one thing that I had learned. And the other thing I'd learned is that science is amazing, but magical mismatched black shoes are incredible. So when it was time to defend my dissertation, all the way at the end, it's true, I put the same mismatched shoes on. Now they call me Dr. Stilling. And Dr. Smit.
Yeah.
That's right, it's the shoes.
It is.
It's the shoes.
I was going to wear them today, but they were worn out. See,
You did it
technology
today.
problem and matching shoes. Research done. Everybody's convinced.
And my shoes are called vagabonds. What does it tell about me, anyway? My name is Peter Smit. I'm a self-employed public relations professional, you would say here in the Netherlands. Communicatie specialist, we say in Holland, or voorlichting, for those familiar with those languages. I specialize in crisis communications and risk communications. So, and I met Erik at that same school at that time. At that time, we were when I had my studies in communications, I was taught the Shannon-Weaver model was really obsolete at that time already in our universities. I was advertised here as being a doctor, but actually I never gotten my doctorate degree. I went for Amsterdam to get a Master of Science degree, and it took me 8 years to get that. It was at the time where you could study anything in the university, and 30% of your time you should devote to other subjects than your main subject. They should reintroduce that. They don't do that anymore in Holland. It's cutting costs, but you get a broad education this way, and I think listening to Dr. Kajaus yesterday, we should interdisciplinary do a lot of things more. Okay, I started teaching at the School of Journalism after my studies. I did that for 7 years. We're talking 1990s here. And the Shannon-Weaver model, as I just said, was already obsolete. Typically in an introductory course we would show it, and then we went on to more modern, more two-way communication models. as a matter of fact, when in the School of Journalism, the curriculum for public relations was added to the School of Journalism, and that was really why they hired me in the first place. And at that time, we were deciding what would be the foundation of this new School of Communications. And we had some very vivid discussions about what should be communications, what really is communications, and how do we teach it to our students. Because of course it was a School of Journalism, and they say you shouldn't be there at all. It's like a bank educating its own burglars, as communications people try to get in the media. But building on the subject as a community, we look back. Wait a minute. Okay. Yeah, building on that subject, we started to think of the dialogue as the primary thing for communications. So typically for maybe Western European studies, the dialogue was used. And at that time I was working with Betteke van Roeder, who is still a leading figure in our field. And she came up with this communication grid for communications. You see here the controlled one-way communication on top and the two-way communication down. And on the other axis it's informing or influencing. And this was proposed by Betteke van Roeder back in 1998. She got her degree on that, her PhD on that one. And if you look at it, you see, she was very much pointing on this, the dialogue as the ideal form of communication, informing the public, not influencing them, and building a two-way relationship on that. But in any society, you also need consensus creation, of course. And in its ideal form, it is the meaning of communication. Now, we were trying to make even a further step on this, and oh no, there's Winner again. We took Ubuntu. Is anybody familiar with the concept of Ubuntu as a philosophy? Yes, you are. So, in this discussion, in building this curriculum, we were taking Ubuntu as our main, as our philosophy. And Ubuntu means it's a way in over in Western Africa, they greet each other. And actually they are saying, I recognize you, and we are being one. Or something like that.
There's a great YouTube video with Mandela explaining
Ubuntu is, yeah, if you want to look into that, look at South African way they handled that in South Africa with Nelson Mandela. And
I played in class because of the operating system of Ubuntu.
okay. But anyway, we tried to do that, and of course then the business administration people got in, and they did some consensus creation with us, and we actually never formed a school of communications based on Ubuntu. But still, this was where I learned what communication really was. I'm going to be back to Whiner, which I really introduced. Oh, okay. Well, this, of course, this is all about interhuman communication, and really, this conference is all about communication with machines, of course. I find that out the hard way when I was driving to Italy 2 weeks ago. And I was leaving only home late in the afternoon after a hard day's work. And when I got to Switzerland late at night, suddenly the car reminded me that I should get off and have some rest. And then I had this car for 4 years. I didn't even know that it had that function, but it really was protecting me, making a judgment about my behavior, feeding it back to me, and I did get off. Let's talk about Winer some more, Eric. Give me that one.
Yeah, let's talk about how, what he didn't tell you, his wife told me, is that car now, every weekend, he washes it, he waxes it, it takes really
No, Eric.
Okay, so the feedback, back to the father of cybernetics, a lot of people credit Norbert Winer. And this is the guy whose work I discovered and almost didn't graduate because of it, but I still stand by it, obviously. Winer, his entire legacy is dependent upon two-way communication, which I'm pretty sure we all agree is the foundation of effective communication, if not all communication. And Winer is directly or indirectly responsible for many, many, many labor-saving devices, labor-saving processes, and labor-saving innovations. Yet he also spoke about labor-saving, and he said that this should be saved to free up human time and labor for more creative, loftier activities that machines are not capable of. It was rather utopian for what appears to me to be somewhat pessimistic philosopher. But Winer hoped for a flourishing of the arts, of music, the humanities, literature, as a natural result of the machines doing more and more and more of our work, our labor, saving us labor time to do other things. And he felt, because he was rather pessimistic, that at best we should re-educate the displaced labor. People, I'm going to coin or use the term disemployed by technical innovation. I don't think there's a lot of discussion about that yet, but I'm still looking into literature for this. But let me just say this. I know there's a lot of people who English is a second language. We typically say unemployment. Basically implies a state of being not employed. But the subtlety of English is such that disemployed implies you once were employed and now you are not. It was taken away. Your employment was taken away. Disemployment. I apologize for using such a subtlety to an international audience, but it's very critical that we think about this. He said that it should not, cybernetics should not become merely a means to increase the profit for the few while disemploying the many. And I think we need to keep that in mind. I am a technical innovator. I'm not standing up here and saying, oh, we're all bad, but I'm good. No. The things that I do save time, create efficiencies. I am helping to disemploy people. And I'm trying to become more and more aware of that. So Winer said cybernetics should not be used simply as a means of increasing profit for the few while disemploying the many. And this reminds me of the work of another great man, not quite so well known, friend of Peter's and mine. His name is Eckhart Vincent. That's Wintzn, Vincent. He was a good friend, an informal teacher, very amazing man, founder of a Dutch company called BSO Origin, which provided software for robotics companies in 24 nations around the world. His company was ultimately bought by Philips Magnavox, and then he took that money and opened a green venture capital nonprofit called Extent. He had really unique ideas on the relationship between natural resource shortage and pollution, between technology and unemployment, and between technical innovation and, yes, tax laws. And all this seems to dovetail with the work of Norbert Winer. Eck was a visionary yet pragmatic business leader in Holland and a little bit of influence around Europe. He was self-described a businessman who looks like a hippie. But he saw the fundamental problems with all these relationships, resources, pollution, labor. All that was grounded in tax law, which blows my mind to think something so mundane as taxes could have such an influence on such large ideas. But he said in many, many countries, taxes make human labor unnecessarily expensive, thus make automation technology an attractive alternative to hiring people. Did you do the Eckhart voice? I can't do a Dutch accent.
Our world has developed a system of taxation in which most of what businesses pay in taxes is personnel related, such as tax on wages and employers' mandatory social contributions. So the more people you employ, the higher your taxes. It's not hard to see how companies respond to that. Since the taxation system has made work as expensive as an entrepreneur or a corporation, you try to make do as few workers as you can, even if that means you use more energy and raw materials, because after all, those expenditures carry much, much lower taxes than taxes on labor.
I apologize, 5 minutes.
Perfect timing. So the takeaway message is, as scientists, technologists, inventors, innovators, teachers, while we devote our time and energy and creativity to developing labor-saving devices, newer and smarter things, we should really think about spending some time devising tools, technology, creating work for the people that our own inventions, have disemployed. Meaningful work. And by meaningful work, I mean work grounded in a person's natural talents, abilities, and interests. People excel in such work. As Don Clifton, the Gallup Leadership Institute's director, wisely told me one time, do what you do well a lot. Don't spend time trying to fix your natural weaknesses. Spend time using your strengths. Very, very counter to what we usually hear in management. But it really works. So if we were able to find out what the people we disemploy with our technology are really good at, they will, and help them work on their strengths, with their strengths, then we're going to see people who are productive and successful and happy every day. And they will, meaningful labor will lead to self-actualization in Maslow's terms. Doing what you do that's a true expression of your talent, interest, and skill. And I suggest that if we were able to devote our time and talent and energy creating work based on people's strengths, talents, and interests, that we can flip Maslow's hierarchy of needs upside down, and that directly from meaningful labor will come self-actualization, which will lead to self-esteem, which will lead to love and belonging, which will lead to safety and security, and food, clothing, and shelter.